Looking out across any ocean, we know what land lies beyond, or if we don't, a map will tell us. But 500 years ago, if you were standing here, what lay miles over the horizon would have been a mystery, except for the storms and fearful dangers that you knew had taken many lives. Those who sailed out of sight and did come back were the heroes of those days, their stories daring and often frightening. Some told of the windless sea of darkness, where sailing ships were becalmed in stagnant water, never to escape. Of seas inhabited by great monsters and human-like figures. Of strange creatures attacking ships and swallowing sailors. If a ship ventured too far south, they said the blazing sun would burn sailors to a crisp as they passed over boiling waters. Without wind, a ship's crew feared the danger of being stranded forever. There were countless fears in the stories told by early sailors. Some fears stemmed from man's ignorance of the shape of the world. Because the Bible spoke of the four corners of the earth, some mapmakers pictured the world as flat. Others pictured our world as a dome studded with stars. Here a curious traveler pokes his head through to study the complicated machines that were supposed to move the sky. Another idea showed the earth floating on a vast ocean, supported by the backs of 4 elephants and a turtle. Science made an early stab at ignorance 300 years before Christ, when Aristotle proposed a theory based on observation.
The shifting of the horizon as one sails, the appearance of new constellations in heaven, and the disappearance of other stars can only be explained if the Earth is a sphere. Only a sphere could throw a circular shadow on the moon during an eclipse.
And so Aristotle proposed that the world was round. But this brought new fears to sailors, such as never climbing back over the horizon or falling off the underside. But the dangers of the distant world, the fear of the unknown, kept ships close to familiar shores. Thus, the landlocked Mediterranean, down through the centuries, became the center of a spreading civilization. As civilization reached northward, a daring people appeared. Unlike others, the Vikings were not afraid of traveling into the unknown ocean. These fearless sea rovers, known as Vikings or Norsemen, sailed near rocky coasts and out onto ocean waters. Their sturdier and lower boats traveled far. One of history's big detective stories has been to know just where they went. The Vikings must have roamed the Atlantic, to Iceland, to Greenland, to the shores of North America. Traces of a colony in Newfoundland reveal the Vikings as the first to discover the New World. But this achievement soon disappeared, almost forgotten. Before Europe could take the first lasting step beyond its shores, changes were needed. What were some of these changes? Up to this time, the year 1000, all ships depended on oars or a single sail. Warships were long and narrow, carrying below hundreds of slaves or soldiers, rowing to the steady beat of drums. Cargo ships with a single sail had to wait for favorable winds to push them in the desired direction. Sea travel was slow and awkward, until shipbuilders slowly began to build better boats, because traders now needed ships bigger and strong enough to survive long voyages and bad weather. Cannons came aboard. These floating fortresses could now face any danger from ocean or port. But quarters remained wet and crowded, and the daily ration stale, if not already bad. The sailor had much to complain about.
Today confirmed our most dreaded fear. Our crew has been struck down with scurvy. There can be no doubt of the ugly sores, swollen legs, bared gums, the shiverings, aye, and the nightmares. How many of us, by the grace of God, will last the journey?
But chances of survival were improving. Faster voyages were made possible by more sails. Better designs permitted sailing into the wind. The long need for more scientific navigation was now answered by the compass, giving an idea of direction, and the astrolabe, an ancient means of determining the north-south position. Ships were ready to explore the world, but when would man himself be ready? We reach now the year 1400. What changes are happening to the people of Europe that lead to the age of exploration? Most important, a new spirit of life bursts forth, bringing the age known as the Renaissance. Now in Europe, scholars rediscover the thinkers of the past, virtually forgotten during the Middle Ages. Reading and writing, the lively exchange of ideas between artists, scientists, clergymen, and laymen, all show a new excitement and curiosity about the world. Old beliefs are questioned. Science knocks away superstitions. The printing press, one of man's most important inventions, appears to spread the new spirit and new knowledge. Books are now printed for thousands to read. One such book tells about the extraordinary adventures of Marco Polo. 2 centuries earlier, he had set out from Venice for the Orient, traveling through Asia for more than 20 years, seeing with his own eyes the fabulous riches of the court and empire of the Kublai Khan. Marco Polo had returned with a fortune in goods, but more important, his answer to the mystery of where these luxuries came from inspired others to follow his example. Europe was showing an increasing interest in trade goods from the East. The Italian towns of Genoa and Venice profit most, importing to Europe treasures from the cities of the Eastern Mediterranean. To these ports, Italian ships bring fine glass, furs, raisins, wines, and oils. To trade for spices, perfumes, silks, rugs, and jewels. Carried by camel caravans, thousands of miles from the east. The routes were difficult, the journey long, and raids and robberies frequent. The most valuable goods brought to the marketplaces are spices, as good as money, so great is the demand. The fact that $2 paid for these spices in the Far East might earn $200 in Europe awakens all towns to the great fortunes in trading. As man's appetite for wealth and profit is aroused, it becomes the main reason for the liveliness that is changing Europe. Trades and industries develop, and towns become busy centers of commerce. To show their products, towns organize trade fairs. Regular trade fairs spring up all over Europe, attracting luxuries from great distances. People travel for miles to share in the gaiety, but the main purpose is business, exchanging many products from many places. One result of trade is prosperous, happy times. Led by successful merchants, a new and strong middle class appears. Merchants and monarchs give each other support, both realizing that trade is the key to wealth and power. The monarchs of Europe become stronger. Nations become more united as they compete with other nations. Ports and towns thrive in the better times of the Renaissance. Suddenly, Europe's prosperity is threatened. In previous centuries, Arabs had exerted pressure, but now Europe is shaken by a new danger. The Turks rise to overrun the Eastern Mediterranean. Traders are attacked, travel is forbidden. The Turks close established trade routes and demand exorbitant prices as middlemen. Merchants panic. Another way to reach China and India must be found. And so the age of exploration is underway. In Portugal, the western limit of the then-known world, appeared an inspiring leader of the age of exploration. Instead of the comforts of his father's court, he chose to live by the barren coast. He believed the ocean might lead to India if man could first overcome his fear and ignorance. This pioneer, Prince Henry, caught up with the ambition to learn, so much a part of the Renaissance, invited scholars, sailors, and mapmakers from all over Europe to study and compile information. One result, these ships, caravels, with a triangular sail designed to swing and take wind from several directions. As a devout leader, Henry saw the world, 3 continents, as a God-given challenge to spread Christianity. But new trade and wealth were also motives behind the annual expeditions that sailed from Portugal out into the vast ocean. The world to the west and south began to be systematically explored. First, the Madeira Islands and the Canary Islands were added to maps. Then, as confidence grew, ships ventured further to the Azores and down the coast of Africa. Cape Blanco was reached in 1441. With the unfortunate result, Negro slaves became profitable cargo. Slave trading, gold, silver, and ivory led captains further away from Portugal. As the coast of Africa slanted east, excitement mounted. Was this the tip of Africa? It wasn't. Prince Henry died, realizing Africa stretched farther south than he hoped. But the inspiration of the man who rarely sailed, although known with respect and reason as the navigator, lived on. In 1487, with Portugal still searching for a new trade route, a fleet journeyed further south than any ship before. They passed the equator, but contrary to belief, the ocean did not boil, nor did the white crew become black like the natives. But there was no denying fierce storms. For 2 weeks, the little fleet was blown and battered helplessly into cold southern waters. When the storm subsided, the captain, Bartholomew Diaz, noting the direction of the coast, pleaded with his worn-out crew to continue the search for the route to India, but they refused. Turning back with heavy heart, Diaz sighted what had been the first goal, the tip of Africa. He gave it a name, but his king later disagreed.
Let us not call the southern tip of this land the Cape of Storms, for if we do, men will be afraid to pass it. Let us name it the Cape of Good Hope, for it fills our hearts with joy and hope. We are now certain to find a sea route to India before long.
But Portugal took further action only after the voyages by men named Columbus and Cabot showed that other countries were pressing ahead to find a western route to the east. So this gentleman of the Portuguese court, Vasco da Gama, only 27, set sail on the southern route. To avoid the storms Diaz had encountered, da Gama headed further out to sea. For over 3 months, the fleet sailed without sight of land, longer than anyone had ever done before. After taking on new rations, they sailed into the Indian Ocean. Escaping from Arab attacks, eventually da Gama reached India. Portugal in 1498 had at last found the sea route to the riches of the East. They were the heroes of a new age. The cargo of spices, jewels, silks, and rugs was a prize to change the course of history. The fact that 2/3 of the crew had died was overlooked when the profit was calculated at 6,000%. As all of Europe was soon to find out, the rewards for discovery were high. The center of power had been in the countries bordering the Mediterranean almost since history began. Would it now shift to nations facing the Western Ocean? Once feared, the ocean was now partly known. It was a highway for Portugal. But other countries were taking the highway in a different direction, to the west. As others tested the horizons of the world, what might they find?